All right. So, Shalom. All right. I'm Haya L. I'm doing my first online lesson. Staying true to fashion. It's gonna be a long one, y'all. But yeah. So long time coming, but here we are, right? Just to preface it, I know some of y'all might watch some of my other lessons online. And excuse me if I sound a little sick. I do have a little congestion going on. But for those of y'all who watched some of my videos in the past, um, my teachings, my street teachings. Um, it's not going to be the same format. I'm not going to be going off on nobody. It's going to be more of a demure lesson. One of the things that our people are critically missing, um, well, we're missing a lot of things here in Babylon, but one of the things that we're critically missing is the ability to voice or pontificate our problems. One of the things that I try to do, even in my street teachings, is I try to use words that force people to think. I understand you're supposed to condescend to a man uh, in relation to what he knows and how he speaks so that you can be more relatable. But you can only relate so much before you can't actually voice problems or issues how they actually are, right? I say all that to basically give the topic of today's lesson. And it's going to be about melanin, but it's not going to be in the sense that it's generally discussed, right? Melanin is generally discussed in a very, I mean, I don't want to say a esoteric way because, I mean, really, you can learn about something and it's no longer pertaining to a specific, body and unknown to you. But it's often talked about in a very obscure way, right? Where people are just saying, "Oh, 6 neutrons, 6 protons, six electrons," and there you go, brother. Melanin, man, is magic. Like, man, that shit's not real, right? I'm gonna talk about it in a more realistic fashion. I'm gonna talk about it from the perspective of our enemy, right? Um, so let's start, right? This is Sirach 5:15. Be not ignorant of anything in a great matter or a small, right? So the Bible instructs us to not be ignorant in any matter, great or small. And it also says in Revelations 1, I'm going to go to it right now and I'm going to read it. Yeah, I thought I had it. Yep, there it is. Revelations 1 and 3. Blessed is he that readeth, and they that hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written therein, for the time is at hand. Right? So we're at the end of days right now. From the way things appear, we're at the onset of Jacob's trouble. Um, but in relation to those things, I guess, there's some things that we need to be aware of in relation to how our enemies see us. And yes, our relations um, between the Israelites and the heathen nations is not a good one, but it's not a good one for a multitude of reasons. That's why there's layers to how they interact with us. There's reasons why they might show us kindness in certain instances, yet having ulterior motives, right? That is why also I was going to bring this out. It's an oldie but a goodie, right? And it's going to be uh, Sirach 12 and 10, right? Never trust thine enemy, like his iron rusteth, so is his wickedness, right? One of the issues that our people have when it comes to waking up to the reality that we're in, right? The hellacious captivity that we're serving under, they can't believe that it goes so deep, right? A lot of people, when you tell them the things that Esau has done to us in the past, they just can't believe it. But when you tell them the things that he's doing to us in the present, it's less believable, right? A lot of times it sounds like something out of science fiction, but it's not. It's things that it's the evolution of the same types of testing that Esau was doing on slaves on the plantation, whether it was cutting open women to fix the fistulas that Esau literally raped into them, um, you know, analyzing the viscera and the body parts of the corpses that they create, from, like whether it be, you know aborted children, um, or in back in slavery days, kids that they just outright abused and killed, or just conducting experiments in general, whether it's infecting us with diseases and the like, and then studying our anatomy to see what changes. But our enemy has been conducting these things for centuries, and what we're seeing the culmination, or at least the amount of progress in relation to the field that our enemy has made. And I'm going to show some of that today, in regards to melanin. Right. So, a good question to start with in this lesson is, and I'm sorry, I just ate, just a little, yeah, settling down, I guess. But one of the things to get into, at the beginning of the lesson, is what is melanin, right? What is it? We always hear about it. We hear about some of the things that it does, right? But from a scientific perspective, what is melanin? And I'm not talking about the molecular makeup of that, although we're going to touch on some of that too, because the way melanin behaves is otherworldly, and it's what makes us special, right? But let's go ahead and get into it. I was looking up a book, Why Darkness Matters, The Power of Melanin in the Brain. We're going to get into a bunch of things here, and it's going to give some insight as to why that's important. I wanted to put that over here, I think. Either way, it don't matter. All right, let's get into it. So, melanin, and we're going to listen to the Greek pronunciation of it.
Melanin.
It's just pronounced melanin. My bad, y'all. But I believe it comes from melis, meaning black or dark. Is a broad term for a group of natural pigments found in most organisms. Melanin is produced through a multi-stage chemical process known as melanogenesis, where the oxidation of the amino acid tyrosine, okay, yeah, it goes into a bunch of stuff, but it's followed by polymerization. Okay, so what polymerization is? Poly meaning many, and then merization. Actually, we'll just look up the word. Right. Yeah, that's a lot to try to recite from memory. So it's any process in which relatively small molecules called monomers combine chemically to produce a very large chain-like or network molecule called a polymer. Right. One of the things that makes melanin so special is not only is it able to basically form, like polymers, where you have one molecule, which is a grouping of atoms, one or more atoms, combined with another group of one or more atoms and form a single molecule, right? Melanin can not only bind with itself in one way, it can bind in many different ways. From what I was reading, they theorize that it can form something called a tetramer. What is a tetramer, right? Tetramer. So a molecule such as an enzyme or a polymer that consists of four structural subunits, right? So that means four melanin molecules can arrange and array themselves in connections to themselves under different circumstances and produce different effects, right? That is one of the theorized reasons for melanin being so versatile, right? But again, we're going to get into all that, right? The melanin pigments are produced in a specialized group of cells known as melanocytes. Now, usually we're told that there are two types of melanin. Sometimes you've heard of the third, right? The one that you generally know about is just the term melanin. And the two that it's comprised of is pheomelanin, which gives rise to like reds, oranges, yellows. Um, our friend Esau has that type of melanin. And yeah, eumelanin, which gives rise to darker hues like brown and black. That's the melanin that Israelites have in varying degrees, right? Because Israel is a speckled bird, right? So we go from the lightest browns, brown as the sands of the desert, to the darkest of soils of the earth, like the verdant soils of a rainforest. Right? We run the spectrum, but there's also another type of melanin, and that's neuromelanin. So in the brain, you have structures, right? And I'm actually going to bring up a little thing here. So in the brain, actually, I'm going to read this first. Neuromelanin is a dark polymer pigment produced in specific populations of catecholaminergic neurons in the brain. It appears in greatest quantities in the human brain, in lesser amounts in some other non-human primates, but is present from the brain in many lower species. Right? Now, what we're going to do is first we're going to look up the meaning of this word. And this is just a word of advice to anybody who wants to learn. If you see something you don't understand, or you don't know what it means, or you're even just a little fuzzy, man, look it up. We're in an information age where it has never been easier to figure things out. Right? So this apparently this is related to neurotransmitters and stuff like that. So that's cool. I mean, related to catecholamines. Catecholamines, sorry. The catecholamine neurotransmitters include dopamine. Okay, that's cool. Anyway, just a little thing to know, right? But so we know that the brain has darkly melanated structures in it that contain neuromelanin. So it's found primarily in a couple of areas in the brain, right? Neuromelanin is a catecholamine based polymer pigment which is concentrated in the neurons of the human Esin pars compacta. Also, it is also although it is also found in other catecholamine or catecholaminergic nuclei such as the ventral tegmental area and locus ceruleus. Okay, locus ceruleus. So you can read this, right? I'm just going to bring it up on the screen real quick. All right, cool. So we know that neuromelanin is found in the brain, right? But we saw two other types of melanin, and they are allomelanin and piomelanin, or piomelanin, however you want to say it. Right? Allomelanin is found in skin, hair, feathers, scalp, eyes, and some. No, it's just melanin. That's one thing I hate about Google. Where is it found? So, allomelanin is a type of nitrogen-free melanin most commonly found in fungi. So, that one's derived from fungi. I believe piomelanin is derived from fungi as well and bacterium. But we're going to look it up to be certain, right? So, red brown pigment. Yep. Bacterial and fungal species. Cool. So, now, the most common type is eumelanin, of which there are two types, brown eumelanin and black eumelanin. So, the most common type of melanin on the planet is eumelanin. Now, the concentration in which eumelanin is found, not just in the skin, but eumelanin or melanin in general, um, is present in every organ of the body, facilitating all types of processes, from chemical processing, to produce certain reactions or to even inhibit certain reactions. It's present to chelate or basically take out minerals and metals that are toxic to the body, such as like shit. What's one? Aluminum, cadmium, basically any heavy metal that's in the body that's really not supposed to be there. It also helps in processing toxins, right? So, what type of toxins? All types of toxins. If you ever got bit by an ant, there's toxins in it, even if it's not fatal. If you've ever been stung by a bee, you ever been bit by a spider. One of the things that I've noticed personally is dealing with Israelites. Typically, you don't notice us having very strong reactions to bug bites, to like say like if you get some what's it called? like poison sumac or poison oak, like any type of plant that has like a toxic sap. Typically, we don't respond to those things, right? One of the things that Edomites respond to that is completely benign to us is citrus juice, right? So say they're out on a hot sunny day and they get some lime or lemon juice on their hands, and then they get sun exposure on that same area. That area will burn up. It'll make sun exposure far more damaging. That doesn't happen to us because our melanin protects us, right? And it's not just in the surface layer of the skin. Melanin is actually generated in the basal layer of the skin, which is the fifth layer. It's the layer of the skin where cellular proliferation takes place, right? So the basal layer is the innermost layer of the epidermis and contains small round cells called basal cells. The basal cell layer is also known as the stratum germinativum due to the fact that it is constantly germinating. Basically, it's constantly producing new cells. You know, as you go throughout the day, your cells are literally coming off and new cells are coming in. Um, Actually, the dust in your house is mainly comprised of dirt and skin cells. That's why it's not uncommon to find hair in the dust, because not only are you shedding uh, basically skin cells, right, from the outer layer of the skin, you are shedding basically dead hairs to be replaced by new hair, right? But melanin is present in that layer in something called melanocytes. Melanocytes are the cells in that layer that basically give rise to the pigment in the skin. But it's not only in the skin, it's everywhere else. And we're going to get into that, right? Pheomelanin is a cysteine or cysteine, sorry, cysteine derived or derivative that contains, I'm not going to say that, man. So it's basically giving the like some of the chemical reasons why um, pheomelanin is different from eumelanin, right? Pheomelanin also contains sulfur, right? Eumelanin does not. That's actually one of the things that makes them critically different in how they function, and it's also one of the reasons why pheomelanin is not nearly as versatile as eumelanin, right? But we're gonna move on. Neuromelanin is found in the brain, right? Neuromelanin. Research has been undertaken to investigate its efficacy in treating neurodegenerative disorders such as Parkinson's. Yeah. So, and then it mentions allomelanin. That's not why we're here. But as you can see, right, eumelanin deficiency results in a disorder in the brain. Now, I have a site up. Actually, I don't think I brought that over. I might have to take a little seek time to get that, but I'm going to get it. It's a site that shows a lot of disorders arising from the lack of melanin or the what's the a defect in the body's ability to produce melanin, right? Whether it's having an adverse response to a chemical called phenylalanine, right, which is basically a chemical derivative that's produced in the process of creating melanin. If your body has an issue with that process or that chemical, your immune system can attack it and produce all types of things like albinism. A lot of people are familiar with that, um, or other disorders. And there are some disorders I had no idea about until I read about them, and I was some cases I was horrified. But um, so we're going to read the synopsis here of the third paragraph. In the human skin, melanogenesis is initiated by exposure to UV radiation, ultraviolet light, causing the skin to darken. That's why when you're born, typically people are lighter skinned, and then as you age, things turn different hues and colors. Like me and my brother, when we were very young, we were very, very fair skinned. Um, and then as we got older, of course, you know, looked more like a stereotypical so-called Negro. Right? But that's common with basically all peoples on the planet that have eumelanin, that is. Because of this property, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a little bit, causing the skin to darken. Melanin is effective or is an effective absorbent of light. The pigment is able to dissipate over 99.9% of absorbed ultraviolet radiation. Now, what do you see when you go into the lotion aisle, right? You see usually next to it is sunscreen. right? Because there are our fairer skinned counterparts here who need sunscreen to tolerate sun exposure. If they don't have sun exposure, the DNA literally in their body, starting with their skin, because that's the outermost facing surface to your exterior environment, begins to suffer degradation due to damage from ultraviolet light, right? But like I said, melanin is in every structure of the body. So every organ of the body is susceptible to damage from electromagnetic, or I'm sorry, magnetic waves, I should say, right? Any type of energetic source, whether it be sunlight, whether it be the waves from your router that's basically emitting wireless signals. All those things are on the electromagnetic spectrum, and they interact with your cellular makeup, right? Melanin helps with the mediation of these electromagnetic forces, right? To render them benign or at least reduce the effectiveness of them, because there is a limit to what melanin can do. But that limit is a very high one because how versatile the substance is, not to mention just because at one point, say like I go out and it's really, really bright and it's uncomfortably bright outside and hot, over time, my skin will darken, meaning I'll have more melanin. Not to mention that melanin can do different things, biochemically speaking, which give rise to different, thresholds and abilities. Right. But we're gonna move on. We're gonna show some of that. All right. So, because of this property, melanin is thought to protect skin cells from UVB radiation damage. So, I actually want to click on that because I'm not sure what the B stands for. So, let's see. It really doesn't give it out readily here. Ooh, exposed to UVB light. Well, we know it's ultraviolet light, right? So, thought to protect skin cells from UVB radiation damage, reducing the risk of foliate depletion and dermal degradation. So, as I said, um, radiation exposure can produce all types of adverse effects in soft tissues. The skin being a soft tissue, right? And melanin protects it. Okay, a cancer of melanocytes, melanin cells, are sorry, and it is considered that exposure to UV radiation is associated with increased risk of malignant melanoma. Right, a cancer of melanocytes are melanin cells. Studies have shown a lower incidence of skin cancer in individuals with more concentrated melanin. So basically, dark-skinned folks ain't getting skin cancer like that. Right? That's why when you look at the highest concentrations of skin cancer on the planet, they are in areas where Esau dwells, right? Israel actually being the number one on the list, though the irony is palpable on that one. But notice the misdirection at the end here. However, the relationship between skin pigmentation and photo protection is still uncertain, as if they don't know what melanin does. When they It's evident what melanin does, right? You look at the difference between a 60-year-old so-called black person and a 60-year-old so-called white person. You can see the difference. But let's go ahead and move on. So, we're going to look at a couple of things that just illustrate some of the basic functions of what melanin is, and we're going to get some more scripture, right? One of the things that our people don't do enough of is they do not stand in awe of the Most High in relation to the things that He has created, right? When you look at something as intricate as the circulatory system of the body, right? If one component of it doesn't work correctly, you have disorder and dysfunction. If something works too well, you have disorder and dysfunction. It's balanced. It's perfectly balanced. And it's redundant. What's redundancy, right? State of being not or no longer needed or useful. So, meaning it's not needed. But in engineering, the inclusion of extra components which are not strictly necessary to functioning in case of failure in other components. So, the body has built in redundancy, and it was placed there by the Most High. What do I mean by that? Say you start running. What happens? Your heart rate elevates. Say you stop running, what happens? There is a process that brings your heart rate not only down, but then it stabilizes it at a normal heart rate. That's redundancy, y'all. That's redundancy. The Most High designed all this stuff into your body, all of it, right? When you get cold, you begin to shiver. That is a process, although it's a mechanical one, through the contraction and relaxation of your body's muscles to produce heat, but it is redundancy, right? Redundancy is built into your vessel at every conceivable level, and melanin is no different. Melanin is actually the epitome of what redundancy means, and we're gonna figure that out. We're gonna go into that, right? But so So we're just going to cover this real quick, just going to read through it. Melanin is a term used to describe a large group of related molecules responsible for many biological functions, including pigmentation of skin and hair and photoprotection of the skin and eye. In humans, melanin exists as three forms: eumelanin, which is subdivided further into black and brown forms, pheomelanin, and neuromelanin. Now, note, they leave the other two out because they're not human derived. Right? Eumelanin and pheomelanin are produced in various amounts in the basal layer of the epidermis within cells called melanocytes. Melanocytes are the mature forms of melanoblasts, which migrate from the neural crest. Now, this is talking about the formation of an embryo, right? That's why it's important when you see these words to understand what's being said. Melanoblasts are the embryonic precursors of pigment-producing melanocytes present in the eyes, ears, menins, or linings of the spinal column, heart, and skin. Also, the menins is in the brain too, right? Around the cortex of the brain. But they are thought to arise directly from neural crest cells or secondarily from other NCC derived cells. So neural crest cells, again, derived cells. Schwann cell precursors. What's a Schwann cell, right? Just to make sure we got the gist of what this is saying. That's not what we want. So a Schwann cell, they're neuroglia, right? What neuroglia are cells that support the neuronal system. So in your body, you have nerve cells, but the nerve cells are responsible for basically neural transmission, transmitting signs and signals throughout your body, right? Neuroglia are the cells that uh, don't facilitate that process directly, but they aid in that process. What's an example of that? A Schwann cell, and this is a great example right here. So what you have around the cells are of your nerves or your neuronal cells is something called a myelin sheath. That myelin sheath, without it, the nerve will not transmit, right? Neuroglia produce that myelin sheath that goes around the neurons. Now, you're going to also see in this lesson that melanin facilitates or helps facilitate nerve healing, right? That's why we recover from injuries that typically leave other people crippled. Like, we're built different, literally from the ground up. We're built different. But so we're going to go back into this. So melanocytes are the mature forms of melanoblasts, which migrate from the neural crest following neural tube closure, right? So what is the neural crest? Neural crest cells are a temporary group of cells unique to vertebrates. We're vertebrates, right? Anything basically with a spine, like in standing upright, vertebrate, that arise from the embryonic ectodermic germ layer, and in turn give rise to a diverse cell lineage, including melanocytes, craniofacial cartilage and bone, smooth muscle, peripheral and enteric neurons, and glia. All right. Now, you got to remember what this says. It migrates from the neural crest following neural tube closure. So this is just the location. We're just going to look this up just to be thorough. But the melanoblasts migrate from that area and they facilitate the development of all those different systems in an embryo. So without melanin, you literally would not form in your mother's womb. So when people talk about melanin, They do themselves a disservice, not actually reading books to find more about the service, more about the substance itself, not finding out what exactly is being discussed when they say melanin or they talk about it and they try to talk about the glories of having it. Not knowing what it does is a huge disservice because you often underspeak in relation to its impact on your life. Without melanin, nothing works. Nothing. That's why when I said we're built different from the ground up, the Israelite man, woman, and child is built different. That's why you set the standard for bone density models. I want to show you that right now. Density demographics. Right? That's the study. I was hoping to get a graph. So these are rates of fracture by race and ethnicity, according to the Women's Health Initiative observational study. All right. So looking at this, now you got to remember, who are they counting as Native American? Who are they counting as Hispanic? And who are they counting as white? Now, you see here, they say Native Americans are the highest group of women on average that have bone fractures. But if you include, or you, I'm sorry, if you detract all the white people proclaiming to be Native Americans who basically join the Dawes roll and get to proclaim that they're Native American all the time on any type of, census form or any sort of registration, this figure would be much lower. Not to mention, GAD has access to some of the worst food and water conditions on the planet. All right. Not to mention it's exacerbated by the rampant drinking, right? Drinking leads to bone loss. But I'm trying to see if I can find something that just says density. Low bone density. So here's a model here that's is talking about the low bone mass in femoral neck T score. All right. So basically, that's just the vertebrae of the neck, right? I believe it's the C or the cervical vertebrae, but either way, this is saying that out of all the groups here, African Americans, and you'll notice they do a little switch here, right? It's a subtle psychological trick where when you see black, you assume it means black people, but if you see white, you assume it means white people. But if you can attribute it right in your head and keep things focused, you'll see that the white man is leading in terms of low bone mass in the femoral neck T score. And you see the African American man is basically he has the densest bones. That's why he's having the least amount of problems. Right? And it's followed up by who else? Mexican Americans, Israelites. Differences in concentrations of melanin, same type of melanin though. Both of us have U melanin. But let's see if we can get one fractures per year. I just want to see over a lifetime. But either way, this detracts from the lesson. Melanin is responsible for all of these different things. The formation of all these different bodies in the actual overall vessel that comprises your body, right? All these different glands and structures and bone structures and neuronal structures from the brain, spinal column, all the nerves that innervate the body. Melanin is involved in that, right? I'm going to leave this up because I actually want to read this. So I'm going to drag that to the back. But, we looked that up. As melanin is produced within melanocytes, it is packaged in small, round membrane-bound organelles called melanosomes. So a melanosome is essentially a sub-organ within a cell, right? Or that's what an organelle is, right? So um, think of it as a compartment in a closet, right? So you have a closet, a room, right? And you have a compartment, a little space with enclosed space that's separated from the overall closet itself. That's what an organelle is within a cell. And melanosomes and melanocytes are exactly that. They are separated portions of a melanocyte that contain the melanin. So melanosomes are tissue-specific lysosome-related organelles of pigment cells in which melanins are synthesized and stored. Analysis of the trafficking and fate of melanosomal components are beginning to reveal how melanosomes are formed through novel pathways from early endosomal intermediates. The meaning of that is not really important right now. Just as long as you got the gist, right? So melanosomes are transported from melanocytes, or in other words, things are melanized by melanosomes. So the melanosomes are responsible for giving pigment to different structures in the body, like your hair. You'll notice as I age, right? If I let my hair grow long and I bring the camera up close, you'll see a bunch of white hairs. Like, and the hair has different texture. It never flows with my hair, right? Shit's always sticking out and doing weird stuff. But that's because those hairs have started to lose their melanin, right? And that affects the actual health of the hair. Why? Because that hair now is exposed to sunlight. And with the exposure to sunlight, you have degradation of the structure of the hair itself. The same thing goes for skin. Same thing goes for anything that begins to lose its concentration of melanin, or if it doesn't have it at all, it's going to be susceptible to damage from radioactive sources. Radioactivity just meaning electromagnetic energy or radiant energy, right? But melanosomes are transported from melanocytes to neighboring keratinocytes. So that's going to be basically the surface layer of the skin. So keratinocytes represent the major cell type of the epidermis, the outermost of the layers of the skin, making up about 90% of the cells there. Now, of course, we know they originate from the deepest layer of the skin, which is, the basal layer of the skin, right? So we're going to go back. So melanin not only influences the area that it's in, the melanocytes have a bunch of little tendrils that stick out, basically increasing their surface area and their ability to transport melanin around them, right? So how do they do this? Melanosomes are transported from melanocytes to neighboring keratinocytes via tentacle-like dendritic processes, right? The reason why I'm going so far into this is when you begin to see what melanin does, it's going to give you a greater appreciation for all these little processes that the Most High created so that the body can literally innervate itself with this super substance. Right? I mean, I have no other descriptor for it. It's literally a super substance. But you'll see. So, dendritic. Okay. Arborization, also known as dendritic branching, is a multi-step biological process by which neurons form new dendritic trees and branches to create new synapses. Hmm. So what we have here is we have dendritic process, something associated with melanin, being associated with neurons. Hmm. That's interesting. But let's look at a picture that shows dendritic processes. So you'll notice this one that I'm circling here. This neural cell or neuronal cell has dendrites or branches. Now, you'll notice that the melanocyte does something very similar, but in this case, it's doing it in the skin. I know this doesn't have very high resolution, but you can see the little squiggly thing down there. That's the little melanocyte starting to basically spread its tentacles everywhere. And those tentacles are how it carries melanin throughout the skin, right? Now, when you understand that melanin innervates every organ of the body and that melanin is integral to every process in the body in one way, one stage or another, you begin to understand the differences that can arise in terms of performance, right? Whether it's how you hear, how you see, how you respond and move. Because you got to remember, just because you might be muscular with lots of, actual muscle and dense bones, if you can't tell those muscles what to do to drive the bones in the body, then it's useless. You're basically a strong oaf that's incapable of fine-tuned movements in a quick manner. right? But we're going to go ahead and return. So melanosomes arriving in keratinocytes are positioned superficially to cell nuclei, which serves to protect from incoming ultraviolet radiation. So that was basically a mouthful, right? So when it says melanosomes arriving in keratinocytes, so basically skin cells that have melanin in them are positioned superficially to the nuclei. What that means is around the nuclei, right? So I don't know why they started with a vaginal epithelial cell, but it's a good example, right? Shit. So you have the cell here, and the part that's been dyed or basically turned purplish blue, that's going to be the superficial layer of the cell in relation to that dot in the middle, which is the nucleus or nuclei, being the plural form of nucleus, right? So what it's saying is melanin arranges itself around the cell. Why would it do that? Well, melanin is a photoreceptive molecule, meaning it absorbs sunlight. As we read, did we read that? I think we did. It absorbs 99.9% of ultraviolet radiation. What causes DNA destruction or degradation? Ultraviolet light. So, if you have protection around your DNA, that means that electromagnetic sources are not going to be able to damage your DNA as easy, right? Not to mention the integrity of your DNA is going to be held up much longer. Hence the term like black don't crack. Hence why it seems like we age slower. It's literally because, in a sense, we do, right? We suffer less external damage from our environment because we have a redundant uh, biochemical source in our body known as melanin in the way it interacts with the world around us. Okay, we're going to go ahead and skip this because it talks about the molecular makeup of melanin and basically the chemical process that has to take place in order to produce it. So, its function in its various forms, melanin fulfills a variety of biological functions, including skin and hair pigmentation and photoprotection of the skin and eye. We all know that, right? But I'm gonna go ahead and hold on. I read this, but man, it's so much to read. It's hard to keep it all in your head. So the interplay between melanin and ultraviolet radiation is complex. Researchers widely believe that melanin production in melanocytes increased. Okay. Populations living closer to the equator tend to develop a greater proportion of eumelanin. Now, keep in mind that they don't even take into account where all of our peoples have been moved from. They look at where people are today and they go, "Oh, this is where they've always been." They do not like Benjamin was not always in the Caribbean. The American Negro was not always in America. But according to them, our history begins with slavery. Hence why they make these statements. Also, hence why a lot of people who are in these fields of biochemistry don't understand the application of their findings, right? Because you have to know a completely new subset of information in order to better apply this, and that is history and migratory patterns, right? So you have to put all those things together and be competent in all those areas of study, and that's a very difficult thing to do, right? I'm not saying I've done it. I'm just saying that's the door if you want to take it, but it's a very difficult thing to do, and it requires a lot of time and study. But populations living closer to the equator tended to develop a greater proportion of eumelanin, which is a UV absorbent, we know that, antioxidant. What's an antioxidant, right? So antioxidants are substances that may protect your cells from free radicals, which may play a role. Plays a role basically in disease. But we need to know, what is a free radical. In chemistry, a radical is an atom, molecule, or ion that has at least one unpaired valence electron. With some exceptions, these unpaired electrons make radicals highly chemically reactive. Many radicals spontaneously dimerize. Most organic radicals have short lifespans. So this is talking about in a molecular sense, of basically, like, what's a really reactive substance? Um, Hydrogen peroxide, right? It's basically something that it responds really really easily. Say like if Mentos and Coke is another good example of that, where you have the Coke easily responding to the Mentos because within the basically the mixture you have a lot of radical type chemicals that easily react, right? But a free radical, why they gave me just radical. So, free radicals are unstable molecules that can damage the cells in your body. They often occur as a result of normal metabolic processes as well as environmental stressors. The body loses its ability to combat their effects as we age. So, free radicals are basically unstable cells that cause unneeded or unwanted chemical reactions in the body that can lead to damage, faster aging, and can lead to, of course, diseases that we can see and feel, like heart disease, um, you know, bone deterioration like osteoporosis, things of that nature, right? But not only is it an antioxidant, so it takes care of free radicals. Okay, so melanin helps take care of free radicals and is a free radical scavenger. So not only is it helping neutralize them, but it's actively seeking them out through its chemical composition in and of itself to neutralize them, right? A chelating agent, if you will, in relation to free radicals. What is chelation? Chelation means to grab or to bind, right? So now, and also this talks about EDTA being, a chelator of heavy metals. Guess what also chelates heavy metals? Melanin does. But we know that chelation means to bind or to grab. So it's literally a free radical chelator. Conversely, populations living further from the equator are relatively richer in pheomelanin. Again, this goes along with Esau's theorized reason for why they are fair skinned and why we are dark skinned. Meanwhile, you have the Inuit people up north who are darkly melanated, and they do not live near the equator. What would these people be doing up in a very Arctic area with dark skin? Oh, because according to Esau, they should have white skin, but they don't. Right? So, melanin is just something that you are born with or you're not born with. You're genetically predisposed to have or not have. And it has nothing to do with where you are, it's how you're built. But less clear is the link between melanin, the sun, and cutaneous immunology. I always mess that up. So, so this is basically just skin immunology, the immune system of the skin, right? Because melanin plays a critical role in the immune system of the skin, also in the immune system of everything else. We'll get into that. It's gonna be a long lesson, y'all. It's gonna be a long one. You see all these tabs? We gonna hit them. So, for those of y'all who sit through my lessons, hey man, more power to you. Because I just want to pour on the knowledge as I can. Because time is short, and if you're willing to learn, I'm willing to teach. Not saying I know everything, but I know a little bit. All right. All right. Both acute and chronic UV light exposure induces immunosuppression. Now, that's true in those lacking melanin, right? Like we could work all day. We do not get like if UV exposure produced immunosuppression, you have to explain to me how my people got through slavery. If it produces immunosuppression, how in the hell is Issachar building all these houses and not dying? How is Jake out here building the roads, doing everything outside, all these labor jobs, because it ain't just Issachar. I see Ephraim out there. I see Benjamin out there. Hell, I even see Judah out there when they want to hire us anyway, because I live in Texas. They don't want to be hiring niggas out here. So. But I see all the tribes out there. They ain't falling over dead over no immunosuppression. They ain't getting no diseases because they out in the sun. If anything, our people notice an increase in vitality and strength as a result of being out in the sun. But UVA light is used therapeutically for a large number of skin conditions, including psoriasis. So what is UVA light? So it's dealing with the wavelength of sunlight, our ultraviolet radiation. So I guess within the spectrum of ultraviolet radiation, there's different like wavelengths of it. UVB being medium, and then UVC being short wavelength. Right. But intriguingly, melanin is believed to have an immunomodulatory change in the body's immune system caused by agents that activate or suppress its function. Remember, I said earlier that melanin is integral to every process of the body, and the immune response in the body is no different. Intriguingly, melanin is believed to have immunomodulatory and even antibacterial properties, although the underlying mechanisms have not yet been fully elucidated. So, in other words, they haven't been fully shown or found out. So, melanin literally plays such a role in all these processes that they can't find them all. It's not conclusive simply by looking at it, because right as they think they know something, like, oh, melanin does this, then they find out, oh shit, it does that too. Oh, and then it's here. Oh man, we didn't see it there, and it's doing this too. Like they keep finding melanin everywhere. Malignant melanocytes rich in melanin are less sensitive to chemo. Why is that? Because melanin helps basically protect from electromagnetic radiation. What is chemotherapy? Chemotherapy is literally radioactive poisoning in the hopes of getting rid of cancer. That's why if you have malignant melanoma, it's very hard to treat because you're trying to use a form of treatment that it's inherently resistant to because it's comprised of melanin. But that's also why we don't get melanoma very often, because to get melanoma, that requires degradation in the DNA structure of the cell, which gives rise to, something called mutagenesis, where the cell mutates due to changes in its DNA structure and begins to do adverse things, whether it's proliferating and causing tumors or just not performing its function in and of itself, making the organ that it comprises less effective, if not completely ineffective once it gets to a certain number. But so malignant melanocytes are rich in melanin, are less sensitive to chemo, radio, and photodynamic therapy, and amylinotic melanomas. I've never even heard of that. But photodynamic therapy, radio, and chemo, this is dealing with radio waves, light, and then chemical radiation, right? But this, what is this? Without the usual brownish tumor regression, genetic diversity. So it's a form of melanoma. Okay, it has something to do with melanoma, obviously. So have longer disease-free and overall survival than melanoma. So basically, if you have a pale, like if you have cancers that don't have high melanin content, they're more treatable than ones that do have high melanin content because they're going to be more susceptible to these things, right? These types of therapies that they've created for themselves and not for us, right? Therefore, some have suggested inhibition of melanogenesis as a therapy for malignant melanoma. Now, you have to understand what this is saying. Therefore, some have suggested the inhibition or the basically the holding back, the stopping, right, a voluntary or involuntary restraint on the direct expression of an instinct, the action of inhibiting, restricting, or hindering a process. All right. So they're talking about basically inhibiting melanin. Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to end this in a couple of minutes. I'm gonna release a bunch of chapters to this. So, but melanin is everywhere. It is everywhere, and the Most High created melanin for us so that we can be distinctly different. That's why if you look at Deuteronomy 7:6, for thou art an holy people unto the Most High God. The Most High thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth. Isn't it ironic that the people who are above everybody in every regard have this mysterious like molecule in them that does everything on the planet? And when I say everything on the planet, I'm speaking in a hyperbolic sense, like I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not really. Because when you find out what melanin does, and I'm gonna keep going in depth, every chapter I'm gonna go more in depth. You're gonna find out the Most High created something that is so dynamic and special that it defies belief. Right? But let me see where we at. Where we at?